After looking at what I consider one of the best moments of Dragalia Lost, a lot of people are considering what I would think is the all-time worst thing. There is a lot of things Dragalia Lost didn't do pretty well. Defense events are too long and agitating, invasion events are nothing but grind, and I'll admit the in-game money is, well, too expensive. But I don't want to look at the negative things of Dragalia Lost, especially now that the series is going to be ending. As the title of this video shows, there are some things in Dragalia Lost I think were not used properly or didn't really get much development, hence why I call it Dragalia Lost Potential. Now this isn't really a countdown, this is just my opinions on what should have been more fleshed out before Dragalia Lost reached its end. Now I haven't read everything lore-wise when it comes to Dragalia Lost, so I might have missed something, but I will try my best to actually try to do it from a list of least important to really important. So let's start off with a really weird choice, one of the cutest dogs in mobile gaming. During the second April Fools of Dragalia Lost, we were introduced to the event Vagabond Pupper, which is probably one of the best April Fools events, though I decided to exclude it from my best list on account of it's not technically an event and it doesn't really last that long, and you don't really get any rewards besides a Pupper sticker. If I remember correctly, they were supposed to announce a future event regarding the Pupper sometime in the future, like maybe a raid event where he was playable, but unfortunately we didn't get anything of the sort. But we did get Vagabond Pupper as a permanent event now. I've already mentioned this in my best events video, but Captain Barbary was a reoccurring fiend boss that appeared in most of the beach adventures. They don't really explain what Captain Barbary is. Is she a fiend or is she a human turned fiend, sort of like what happened to Urias in his story arc? If Barbary was technically human, we probably missed out on a really cool event where we could have Barbary as a party member. And that goes into my next segment, ironically enough. Unused Adventurers and Dragons. There are actually an introduction to a lot of different dragons and adventurers we sadly couldn't get. I mean, we are literally missing 2 of the 5 members of the Agito. Plus, there are also other characters who could have been great introductions into the world of Dragalia, like Nephren, Mei Hao Wang, Xion, and Picaro. Dragalia actually mentioned that there were some unused dragons that would have been eventually playable, such as a 4th brother within the Valentine's group of brothers, and a dragon's husband was supposed to be playable as well. But there are also other characters I feel like could have been also really well fleshed out as well. For example, Dorothy. Dorothy was a member of an assassin's group that Alex was a part of. Though we mostly only saw Dorothy through Alex's story arcs, mostly in her main and gala version, we don't really get much of Dorothy. There might be some extra stories with her, but I'm not entirely sure. Ranzel's father, Zacharias, the Lord of St. Loiter, was also a missed opportunity in my general opinion. Think about it. You could have a party of both Ranzel and his dad working together to save Alberia. It's kind of understandable why he couldn't really join the Alberian army, but I feel like it was still a missed opportunity, but I kind of wish they did more with him story-wise, especially considering that this is one of the main character's parents. Another character we never really get to see is Saint Starfall. For those who don't know, Saint Starfall is the Santa Claus of the Dragalia Lost universe. Though most party members have a depiction on what they think Starfall would look like, the closest thing we ever got to a real Saint Starfall was a side story with Makoto trying to find Minuichi, but it adds more of a mystery to whether or not Saint Starfall was a real being or not. I mean, if we can have Ilya as a party member, why couldn't we get Saint Starfall? Speaking of other holiday events, and what comes after Christmas is usually New Year's, and of course, we're going to talk about the Worm Clan members. Though Celestial Showdown was a really good ending to the Worm Clan arc, unfortunately there were a good amount of members of the Worm Clan that we never got to see. Mostly the years of the sheep, the rabbit, the dog, the snake, and the dragon. If Dragalia Lost were to ever return, I really do hope we see these members of the Worm Clan sometime in the future. To end off looking at the characters who could have been playable in Dragalia, I'm just going to look at the different types of people that are in Dragalia. Humans and Sylvans got the most development, but unfortunately a lot of the other subspecies that are in Dragalia Lost didn't. This include the Rockin, the newly announced Abyssians, and in my opinion the most underutilized, the Chi-Lin. Summoning wise, we only got 3 Chi-Lin members, 2 of which are the same person, 2 Rockins, one of which was the last 4-star unit, no Abyssians whatsoever. Considering how late they were introduced into the Dragalia Lost series, it was kind of understandable why they weren't utilized properly. And the most criminal, the species of Pipple. You have the most perfect well-designed character in Dragalia Lost and you do absolutely nothing with him, especially considering that you can literally grow Pipples from the ground. Now I'm done talking about the characters, I think there are some story elements I feel like that were also underutilized. Though there are some story arcs that did get a proper conclusion, such as the Apostles and the Worm Clan arc, unfortunately that doesn't mean the same for a lot of other arcs that are, well, never going to get a conclusion in my opinion. One of the more interesting story arcs that I'm surprised never got a proper conclusion was the Nalartotep arc, which usually involved the characters Heinwald, Kuran, Akasha, and Lathna. And the most important thing about Lafna is the fact that she is the being who was chosen to take on the form of this mighty dragon. And though considering that the entire universe is destroyed, I doubt she has a major important role anymore. Speaking of which, Akasha's Lament. We kind of learned early in Akasha's story that she was a normal person who just loved to seek knowledge. But after reading a cursed book, she became consumed to learn so much knowledge that she would actually go towards the dark arts, and would try to free Nyarlathotep from Lafna. Though Heinwald promises to free Akasha from her prison, sadly we'll never get to see that story recognized. Though I figured that the story arc was eventually going to happen, the arc in the Human Liberation Society I feel like was a out of nowhere story arc. Though we did get more androids like Irene and Feeny, go with Laxi and Mascula, who by the way should have also gotten proper story arcs, especially learning who their maestro was and why they were truly created. The Human Liberation Society and the arc were a complete out-of-nowhere story element introduced really late into the series as well. Not much later that they were going to be ending Dragalia Lost, it was a little too late to save this story arc. The fact that human society decided to go into space and not to live in harmony with dragons did seem like an interesting story element that would have been, a smart idea. And maybe the idea that maybe someone from the arc created both Laxi and Mascula to find proper peace between the two worlds would have been a great way to actually collaborate with the Human Liberation Society and also finally get closure for both Laxi and Mascula, who even in the main story are just kind of there, honestly. But if you want one of the most disappointing story arcs that are never going to get a conclusion, I think no conclusion to the Syndicate arc was kind of criminal. If they had enough room for maybe one more event before Advent of Origin, I think ending the Syndicate arc would have been probably the best way to go. Heck, I feel like you can even get the Syndicate and the organization trying to resurrect Nyarlathotep to actually work together. That way you can kill two birds with one stone. The Syndicate's still out there, or were out there, and we haven't yet to see Aldred finally succeed in his revenge, or to find proper closure. Also, that masked character introduced later in the second Syndicate event, that's clearly Carl. Though it was nice to see a lot of cool events, especially a few interesting crossovers, I feel like you could have gotten rid of one of them and replaced it with Grand Blue Fantasy. Considering that Cygames were the people developing this, it's kind of a shame we never really got a proper crossover with them and the Grand Blue Fantasy universe. Then again, some characters from Grand Blue Fantasy are summonable in Dragalia Lost. This includes Albert, Urias, Lily, and probably tons of other I'm probably forgetting about. But the fact that we didn't really get one where UNUTE and friends actually get sent into the Grand Blue Fantasy universe and try to find a way back to Alberia and are introduced to the main characters of the Grand Blue Fantasy games as summonable party members seems like a lost opportunity in my opinion. Maybe Grand Blue Fantasy will eventually have a Dragalia Lost event, but that all really depends on Nintendo. But now that we're near the end of the video, there is one thing that I've always been very curious about throughout the entirety of Dragalia Lost. And a lot of people tend to not really pay attention to this character for understandable reasons. They never really had a story element whatsoever, and it's never really properly understood how this mechanic works. I'm of course asking, who is the Summoner? If you've been playing Dragalia Lost and doing summon showcases, you kind of notice this mysterious robed person throwing in either Wormite or Diamantium, helping you eventually summon that one 5-star character you've been wanting. Of course, to no luck whatsoever. But who is the Summoner? We never really get anything story related on how summoning works within Dragalia Lost, but my personal theory is the Summoner is a unique being entirely. I think the Summoner basically messes with time in a way, as time travel has been kind of this reoccurring thing throughout Dragalia Lost. So it wouldn't really surprise anyone that maybe in the final story arc of the game, the Summoner is the person who is trying to alter this timelines to get to this certain part of the storyline that we are to now, allowing you to run across all these different party members along the way. And to add a little more interest to who this Summoner is, maybe the Summoner is actually Yuden's mom. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time a lot of characters have cheated death time and time again. Or maybe this is a type of afterlife where she tries to alter these futures in order to protect her family. But of course, most of this is all speculation on my part, and of course, Dragalia Lost potential. That's all from this video, and tune in for the very last video of Dragalia month. So until then everybody, see you next time.